People ask me all the time, how do you become successful? People ask me, and I say, number one is you have to enjoy what you do. Donald's a promoter. He's a carnival barker. He's a P.T. Barnum. He's a larger-than-life figure.
I've never met anyone quite as addicted to publicity as Donald Trump.
He has all my world. He's in this because he loves the thrill of victory chase.
If you set Donald Trump down in the middle of the Mojave Desert, he would open a soft drink stand. He will never go down.
America's most recognizable tycoons. Both his name and face are synonymous with a brash, bold style that's unique to Donald Trump. Now, decades after making his first $1 million, Donald Trump has conquered new ground on primetime TV. His reality show, The Apprentice, hit the airwaves in 2004. Brought Donald Trump's gutsy business style into living rooms across the country.
I think The Apprentice just hit a chord. It was a tremendous success in every respect. And now that's all anybody wants to talk about is The Apprentice.
The Apprentice is a grueling competition for one of the most sought-after opportunities in America, the chance to work for Donald Trump. The winner also gets a six-figure salary and a first-hand look at the life of a legend.
It was probably a week after I won The Apprentice, I got a phone call from Donald Trump. But he said, Bill, I need you to do me a favor. And I said, of course, whatever you need. He said, I need you to become a judge at my Miss Universe contest in Quito, Ecuador. I was like, oh, twist my arm, Donald. And I'm a company man. I'll do whatever I can do to help the company. But in all seriousness, it really opened up his world to me and shown me what business is like at that level. And it's pretty fascinating to see.
It's that combination of glitz paired with shrewd business sense that has made Donald Trump an American icon.
Donald Trump is a natural television personality. He knows how to play to the cameras. He likes the camera, and the camera likes him. And I think Mr. Trump has a bit of ham in him, and he plays to that side of himself and enjoys it thoroughly. He loves life.
That life began in 1946 in Queens, New York. He was born into a family that had profited from the American dream for 2 generations. His grandfather, Frederick Trump, came to the U.S. from Germany in 1885. He worked as a barber in New York City until he was struck by gold rush fever. The ambitious young man packed his bags and headed west. He opened several restaurants and hotels in the Pacific Northwest and the Yukon, and made a small fortune catering to the miners and prostitutes who lived in the region. He later returned to New York, began a family, and established real estate holdings in the borough of Queens. Donald's father, Fred, was a hard-working builder. He was 30 years old when he met Mary McLeod, a young girl visiting from Scotland. In 1936, they got married and moved into a quiet neighborhood in Queens. After World War II, Fred's construction business took off. Returning GIs demanded low-cost housing, exactly what Fred Trump knew best. The Trumps soon had 5 children: Mary Ann, Fred Jr., Elizabeth, Donald, and Robert.
I think my most vivid memory is when my mother would be waiting. We all tumble in after school every day, and Donald would always come in the door asking, Mom, I want 2 lettuce and tomatoes with mustard sandwiches. When he was a little kid, when he had that brat-like quality, we used to call him the Great I Am.
The Great I Am was enrolled in the Kew Forest School in Queens. But even before his kindergarten days, Donald was learning important lessons from his father. Weekend family outings consisted of visits to construction sites and real estate properties.
One of the things I learned from being with my father is how to build. My father was a very, very stern, strong guy, but a very good one. I mean, he was a fantastic guy, but he was one of the toughest men I've ever met mentally. This man, from a mental standpoint, I mean, he could do whatever he wanted.
Donald enjoyed going off to the construction site, riding the bulldozer with the bulldozer drivers, and learning about building from the bottom up, because that was very important to him and to my father.
Donald's aptitude for construction didn't carry over into the classroom. The grade schooler was frequently in trouble. Once he even punched his music teacher in the eye because he thought the teacher was inept.
Maybe being somewhat rebellious is good because you're willing to break out of the pack. But there was a real rebellious streak, and I think to a certain extent I still have that.
After 7th grade, his father decided to put him someplace where they enforced the rules, the New York Military Academy. There, he ran into Major Ted Tobias, who during the next 5 years would redirect Trump's rebellious energy.
Major Tobias is a rough, tough cookie. Rough as you get. And I mean physically rough. I mean, he would come at you like you'd never seen before. He straightened me out. I was a little wise guy, a little brat, and you just couldn't mess around with this guy.
I was a tough cookie, yes, I was, to all the cadets. He was not my project. He was just another cadet that needed a little more attention than some of the others.
In 5 years, Donald changed. He became a star athlete and an honor student. He was promoted to cadet captain and put in charge of the honor guard. In the 1963 Columbus Day Parade, Cadet Trump marched down the street he would one day claim as his own.
Who would have known that right at the major corner of 5th Avenue someday I'd have buildings going?
There are a few people who have that electric quality when they walk into a room. Donald Trump has it. It was a gift. It's not something you develop. It was there. It was there when he was 13 years old. He was the kind of guy who people tended to follow from a very early age.
When he graduated from the New York Military Academy in 1964, there were a lot of opportunities opening up for Donald Trump, even one in professional baseball.
Art Didmar came down from the Philadelphia Phillies to talk to him about going into the minor leagues, and he said to him, "No, thank you, I'm going to go to college."
Trump studied at Fordham University in New York and then attended the prestigious Wharton Business School at the University of Pennsylvania. From there, he could have gone into any business he wanted, but he decided to follow in his father's footsteps. Unlike his father, however, Trump wanted to break ground in some of the most expensive real estate in the world.
I used to stand opposite Manhattan in Brooklyn and Queens on the river looking across to Manhattan saying, that's where I want to build. I mean, I want to be there.
Anyone who's tried to take on Manhattan knows that the Big Apple can be a mighty adversary. Before you make a move, you need a plan. And Donald Trump was getting ready to attack. In 1974, 28-year-old Donald Trump was positioning himself to become a real estate mogul. He had no doubt that he'd achieve his goal. He just needed a little more time and a little help. So he went where the influential people went, places like the exclusive Le Cirque and Studio 54. Eventually, he made friends with a powerful celebrity lawyer, Roy Cohn, who introduced Trump to New York's elite.
I met Donald back in the Stone Age. He was just fresh out of Wharton. It was a dinner party in New York where all the top movers and shakers were. And being piloted around was this young, tall drink of water with blonde hair named Donnie Trump. Nobody knew who he was. Nobody cared. But his pilot was Roy Cohn, whom everyone knew. Roy introduced me to him, and he said, see this kid? This kid is going to own New York one day. I said, yeah, lots of luck. Pass the gravy.
Donald Trump was brimming with big ideas, but didn't have the experience or the cash to turn them into reality. Of course, Donald wasn't about to let that get in his way. He planned to buy and gut the failing Commodore Hotel in Midtown Manhattan. The project, he believed, would breathe new life into the old hotel and spark a renaissance in the area.
I think his father thought it was ridiculous, impossible, couldn't be done. Donald was overreaching. He was abandoning a very good business back in Brooklyn and Queens. And I think he probably gave him a very hard time about it.
Nobody wanted to give me money because, number one, I was pretty much untested, although I had done very well in the Brooklyn world and the Queens world. I was pretty much untested. It's like you have to now step up to the next level. And they were not really willing to get me money.
But Donald Trump forged ahead.
He doesn't like to lose. He doesn't lose very often. He's a fighter, and I think you have to be a fighter in order to do what he does.
He's a person unplagued by self-doubt. You know, a lot of people in this world feel better when they are in the presence of someone who is certain. Well, Donald Trump embodies certainty, and it took him an enormous distance in the business world.
I just don't like taking no for an answer. The people that really make it are people that just don't give up. They just keep going.
May 4th, 1975 is a milestone in Donald Trump's career. He announced his first major deal. He had not only persuaded the Hyatt hotel chain to become partners in the Commodore Hotel, he also secured hefty bank loans and a 40-year tax abatement from the city. Trump was no longer an untested nobody. He was an up-and-coming real estate mogul and a force to be reckoned with.
Well, people say I have a certain style. I'm known as somebody that's direct and to the point because I don't want to waste a lot of time, but it's something that for me has worked.
That attitude carried over into his personal life.
I was then a director of the Miss Universe pageant, and all he wanted to do was to meet all the girls, Miss Sweden, Miss this, Miss that, all blondes. He met them all. Nobody else was allowed near the girls. Donald Trump ended up with all of them. So I thought, this guy is really pretty sharp. Then he meets Ivana, another blonde, but this one was smart. This one knew exactly how to work him, and she did.
The stylish woman who captivated the Playboy was Ivana Zelnikova-Winkelmeyer, an Olympic skier from Czechoslovakia. In Canada, she had become a top fashion model. She was on assignment in New York when she and her friends ran into Trump at a restaurant.
He said, I can see that you girls having a hard time to get a table in the restaurant. I can help you. So I look back at the girls, my friends, and I said, I have a good news and I have a bad news. Now, good news that we're going to get a table real fast. The bad news, this gentleman is definitely going to go and want to sit with us. They say, Ivana, take the table.
Trump quickly followed her to a fashion show in Montreal. Afterward, Ivana began making trips to New York, running around the city in Donald's limousine. It seemed as if Donald Trump had finally met someone who could match his competitive spirit. As a champion skier, Ivana had broken her legs numerous times, but as soon as the casts came off, she was back on the slopes preparing for her next race.
Ivana really brought a lot of spirit into the whole group. Everybody adored her. And she was great for Donald. I mean, Donald and I had been friends for many, many years. And he was always looking for some fabulous, terrific woman. And Ivana really hit the spot.
When I met Ivana, I knew she was very special. I had no idea that I was going to be getting married. I wasn't looking to get married. I was having a lot of fun. But as I got to know her, I realized she was more and more special. And at some point, I realized that we'd be getting married.
On New Year's Eve, he just went on one knee and asked me to marry him. Old-fashioned way. Was a gentleman.
After haggling over a prenuptial agreement drafted by Roy Cohn, Donald and Ivana got married in Marble Collegiate Church, then moved into a modern apartment overlooking Central Park.
I kind of grew up in the early days of the marriage with Ivana and Donald, before they became this huge powerhouse, when she was just a blonde and he was just a guy, and they got together. They became extremely powerful. It was symbiotic.
Soon Donald put Ivana in charge of the interior design of the Hyatt Hotel.
At some point, I realized that Ivana's energy was going to overtake her homemaking. She had a lot of energy. And I thought that maybe what I do is get her involved a little bit with the business. And by that time, my business was becoming very big.
My duty was more interior designs and managing the properties and cleaning up after him, because he already was on another deal. So this is how it worked.
According to Trump, Ivana's salary was $1 a year, plus all the dresses she could buy. In September of 1980, the first major deal of his life finally opened its doors for business. The Grand Hyatt was just the beginning. Donald Trump was already involved in his next even bigger deal. He bought the property next to Tiffany's on New York's Fifth Avenue. But more importantly, he bought the air rights over the prestigious jewelry store. Air rights may not mean much anywhere else, but in crowded Manhattan, the rights to build straight up are pure gold. Construction began on what he modestly named Trump Tower, a 68-story building, the tallest residential building in Manhattan at the time. Trump Tower was not just another New York City skyscraper. Even jaded New Yorkers couldn't help but notice its flashy materials. Brass, reflective glass, and rare peach-colored marble that Donald and Ivana discovered on one of their many trips to Europe. The Trump Tower atrium came complete with a waterfall 80 feet high.
It's like going into another world. There's first a silence, then you see the waterfall, you hear it, and you forget about where you are, even in New York City. So the building has a certain magic to it.
His Trump Tower is the biggest, the grandest, the glitziest, the pinkest, the marblest, the brassiest. Let it be.
From the day I built it, it's been successful. It's not my biggest building, it's not my biggest job, but I think my favorite building would always have to be Trump Tower.
His father was in awe of him. I think his father's reaction was, he's in another world. He's bigger and more glamorous and more successful and more connected than I will ever be. And I think he admired him.
Trump Tower showed that Donald Trump was a player in the New York business world. He was now building his empire and was obsessive about it.
I had the flu. I couldn't even talk. But I did go to the site first thing in the morning, knowing that he would be there, and inspected it, and everything looked fine to me. I get a phone call. Donald said, the first floor hung balcony is lopsided. I said, Donald, I'm sure it's okay. I'm sure I've looked. It's not right. Get it fixed. Click. So I got out of bed, wrapped myself in 87 layers, went up 3rd Avenue, and stood there in the snow, staring at it from every angle, and I'll be damned.
From 500 yards, the boss had somehow spotted a balcony that was 1/2 inch off kilter.
I had 103, but there I was, and there we were chopping that balcony off, and it was being totally set and poured again. And he was just waiting for me to call him to tell him he could come and look at it again.
One day he picked up the phone, and he had a construction engineer or maybe a contractor for some big job on the phone, and he started screaming at him and yelling and ranting and raving. I mean, like he was, veins popping out of his neck. And he gets off the phone after about 2 minutes, slams it down, turns to me, face completely relaxes. He smiles. He says, "You think that worked?" Well, that's Donald.
He's a fierce competitor. He loves competition. I think that's what drives him. He's certainly, not necessarily in this just for the money, because he has all the money in the world that he needs. He's in this because he loves the thrill of the victory and the chase.
Trump's quest for his next big deal led him to Atlantic City, where there's plenty of cash on hand. Soon, he added 2 gaudy jewels to his crown: Paris Trump Plaza and Trump Castle. By their second year in business, the 2 casinos were grossing roughly $30 million a month. The casinos were the perfect venue for Trump to showcase another one of his passions, championship boxing.
Michael Tyson, 218 pounds and 1/4.
Trump's casinos not only pulled in the big fights, they also enticed big-name celebrities to watch them, and Trump was exactly where he wanted to be, right in the middle of it all.
Something I love about the basics of boxing. It's 2 men in a ring, slugging it out. There's no con. You just have to rely on yourself, both your mental and your physical ability. And there's something very beautiful about those basics that I've always admired in the boxers.
Trump's own fighting spirit had made him millions, but the 39-year-old developer hadn't even hit his stride.
You don't like this one, I think. It's a little bit different. It's different than a building. We're getting tired of it.
Donald Trump and his fashion model-turned-businesswoman wife, Ivana, had quickly become one of New York's richest and most recognizable couples. Their children, Donald Jr., Ivanka, and Eric, lived in the lap of luxury. During the week, the family made their home in a 3-story penthouse in Trump Tower. On weekends, they escaped to a sprawling Connecticut estate. Donald and Ivana shielded their children from publicity, But the famous couple enjoyed the spotlight for themselves and didn't hide their expensive lifestyle. Some criticized them for gaudy excess, an impression that may have come from some of their more conspicuous possessions, including their home at the top of Trump Tower.
They began to make real waves by, they bought or built or redid the Trump Tower, and they had this gilded apartment there that was so rococo and so full of ormolu or fake ormolu or something that you couldn't believe it. It was sort of like a Marie Antoinette fantasy.
The millionaire tycoon just loved living large. He could buy almost anything now, and like a lot of the super rich, started collecting a lavish assortment of big-ticket toys. He called them his trophies.
You're going to like this one, I think. It's a little bit different. This is different than a building. We're getting tired of the building.
First, there was the yacht. Not just any yacht, but one of the biggest yachts in the world. Formerly owned by the richest man in the world, the Sultan of Brunei. Donald renamed it the Trump Princess. Then there was the house, one of the grandest homes in America. The 118-room estate called Mar-a-Lago, built in Palm Beach, Florida in the 1920s. And then there was the airline. New Yorkers woke up one day and found that the Eastern Shuttle was now the Trump Shuttle. And just when everyone thought there was no way Trump could Trump himself, he did. The historic, elegant Plaza Hotel had sat on Grand Army Plaza on Manhattan's Fifth Avenue for more than 80 years. No hotel in America could match it in prestige. So Donald went out and bought it. He put Ivana in charge of the hotel. His wife's glamorous reputation and business acumen made the plaza the place to see and be seen. Donald Trump wrote all about his aggressive business style in Trump, The Art of the Deal, which hit the bestseller list in 1988. Suddenly, Donald Trump was a celebrity.
He made up his mind that he was going to sell more books than Lee Iacocca had sold, and he got on the press bandwagon. And that press started to hit. He loved it.
All of a sudden, it was like walking down the street with Cary Grant or something. People would come up, "You're Donald Trump, you're Donald. Would you sign my handbag, sign my shirt, sign my sweater?"
I've never met anyone quite as addicted to publicity as Ivana and Donald Trump. I think one of the things they had in common was they both loved publicity. They both loved the limelight.
But Donald and Ivana also got on a lot of people's nerves.
They had a lot of money, and they made everybody know they had a lot of money, and Donald had this enormous ego.
And Ivana gave Donald something to match that ego. His nickname, the Donald.
My English at the time was not great, so I put the in front of everything. The fish, the flower, the house, and the Donald. So this is how it started.
He didn't just have a first name, he had the Donald. It was like a title almost, the Marquis or the Count.
Donald and Ivana weren't just taking on New York society. They were also becoming a powerful business team. Donald had made Ivana Trump president of Trump Castle in Atlantic City, as well as the Plaza Hotel.
He was just bent on establishing her as a great executive and a great business person and a person who could do anything. There she was every day in her stiletto heels, working like a dog and running all around the hotel, and she wasn't just fooling around. I thought she always was trying to impress him that she was as good as he wanted her to be.
But as good as Ivana was, her business savvy couldn't keep the Donald from the brink of financial ruin.
Donald Trump's crown is in hock tonight.
By the end of the 1980s, Donald Trump had become a world-famous real estate tycoon, and the publicity-conscious millionaire was loving every minute of it. He could never have guessed that the end of that decade would bring the near collapse of his once booming empire. The trouble began that fall. Trump was building the biggest hotel casino in the entire world, the Taj Mahal in Atlantic City. Construction of the billion-dollar complex was far behind schedule and getting more expensive every day. Then in October, 3 of Trump's top gaming executives chartered a helicopter for Atlantic City. the flight spun out of control and crashed, killing all on board.
That had an impact on me, I can tell you, a big impact on me. It sort of said, what is this life all about? They were friends of mine. They were great executives. We were doing tremendously well. And then all of a sudden, my whole management team got wiped out on one helicopter. And it really had an impact on me, which I think probably had a negative impact in terms of my relationship with Ivana.
Donald and Ivana still seemed like the perfect couple, but behind the scenes, their marriage was in deep trouble.
I think having Ivana in the business was very, very unfair to the marriage, because I'd come home for dinner at 7 o'clock and Ivana would tell me business stories. And maybe after going through the wars all day, I didn't want to hear business stories. Maybe I've heard enough of the business during the day. I didn't want to be married to an executive.
We would talk during the day about business, and we would talk about the evening about business. And so, eventually there was no time really for romance and all.
In early 1990, Ivana learned that her husband was having an affair.
I remember speaking to her one day at the Waldorf, and I said, "Is it true that he's having an affair?" And she said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Why don't you just watch yourself?"
It was on the ski slopes of Aspen that the Olympic skier Ivana Trump came face to face with the other woman, Marla Maples.
So here he is having this affair. He had stashed her at a hotel called the St. Moritz, which he then had. She was in Aspen when his wife, Ivana, was in Aspen. And they had this confrontation on the top of the slopes. And Marla wasn't going anywhere. She was going to get this guy.
The confrontation between Ivana Trump and Marla Maples made headlines around the world.
It is, in fact, the site of a stormy love triangle.
Wherever I went, the headline in English, in French, in the London papers was Trump, 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 Trump.
It was a very big story for the time. It ran about 3 months every day in the tabloids. It shot the tabloid newspaper sales up about 50%. It drove television viewing up. It had a life of its own.
But the media frenzy over his marital problems put Donald right where he liked to be, on the front page.
He loved, I think, being in the headlines every day for 3 months. He loved when the Post printed the best sex I've ever had headline that Marla was supposed to have said about him, which later they denied she'd ever said. But he loved it.
Donald once told me, who else do you know that can get their picture on the New York Post 5 days in a row and also have your name in Indochina and Taiwan and all over the country, all over the world, I should say.
But Trump underestimated Ivana's importance to his weakened empire. Her glamour and sophistication gave the properties she oversaw a sense of elegance. She was also a popular figure in New York society columns, which gave the media-savvy Trump a steady stream of free publicity. Ultimately, it was Ivana who decided she had had enough.
I once said to her, "Honey, you're a European wife. Why don't you act like a European wife?" Which means, look away. So she says, no, I don't have that. I don't have, if he cheats, I don't have him. So she got rid of him.
Ivana Trump filed for divorce, contesting the amount in their prenuptial agreement. She truly believed Donald was a billionaire, so she sued him for half of what she thought he was worth. Then the fight got ugly.
It was rough on the kids. There was certainly, a year and a half there, and I guess it even extended longer than that because it was a rather messy divorce that extended into multiple years.
The couple's public brawl ended suddenly when Ivana's beloved father died unexpectedly in October of 1991.
Donald Trump actually flew over for the burial. He and Ivana were in the midst of their divorce. They were arguing about everything, custody, money, and he put his arm around Ivana. The 3 children were with them, and after that scene at the funeral there and the burial, they decided they were going to get divorced, but they were going to do it amicably, and they were going to, for the sake of their children and for the love that they had shared, do the right thing.
The divorce settlement cost Donald $14 million cash and the $12 million family home in Connecticut. Their relationship was shot, but as this 1995 commercial reveals, they still knew how to get together and make money.
May I have the last slice?
Actually, you're only entitled to half.
The couple remained a team when it came to raising their 3 children and instilled in them the value of hard work and self-sufficiency. While their daughter Ivanka was attending the prestigious prep school Choate Rosemary Hall, the Trumps gladly paid her tuition, but they insisted she earn her own spending money. So Ivanka took the beauty and brains she inherited from her mother and father and went on to become a successful model. When she graduated, she headed off to college hoping to follow her father into the business world. Meanwhile, Trump had other worries. He barely managed to open his prized Atlantic City casino that April.
Here's America's foremost entrepreneur, Mr. Donald Trump.
It was another glitzy launch for the Trump empire, but the Donald's luck didn't last. The economy was in a recession, and the real estate market was plummeting.
The name Taj Mahal means crown of the palace. Donald Trump's crown is in hock tonight.
Donald fell on very hard times after they got divorced. His credibility was at low. Plus, the real estate market had fallen apart. Plus, people weren't that crazy about Marla. So Donald really took a tumble.
I was at the highest of all pedestals. And then one day, the pedestal was knocked out from under me. I went from the very highest point, the hottest in the country, the highest point, and then all of a sudden I'm getting horrendous front page articles that we predict that he won't be able to make it back. He's finished. I owed billions and billions of dollars, just billions. The real estate markets totally collapsed and many other markets collapsed, and it was bedlam.
Trump sold off some of his biggest assets. His airline, the Trump Shuttle, his yacht, the Trump Princess, his first big success, the Grand Hyatt, and most painful, the Plaza Hotel in New York. In return, Trump got equity in his casinos. They turned out to be the cash cows that kept his empire alive.
And I think any great entrepreneur loves to prove people wrong, and that's something that he's been able to do. And I think if you look at Donald Trump, he's a guy who never quits. This guy never gives up.
Despite his financial woes, Trump continued his relationship with Marla Maples, an aspiring actress 17 years his junior. In many ways, she was the opposite of the older, more worldly Ivana.
I brought in more of a at-home, softer quality, more spiritual side of life, and he probably liked that I wasn't so caught up in the social side of life. I think he was really tired of that.
I don't believe down deep in his gizzard he wanted to marry Marla. He might have wanted to have Marla. He might have wanted to own Marla. He might have wanted to play, but get married for what purpose? To give up millions?
Maybe Trump wasn't ready for marriage, but in the spring of 1993, he got ready for fatherhood. Marla became pregnant, and on October 12th, their daughter Tiffany was born. After a lot of speculation over whether the two would tie the knot, Marla signed a prenuptial agreement for a mere $2 million, and the Georgia Peach got her man.
He really has the desire to have me be more of the traditional wife. He definitely wants his dinner promptly served at 7, and if he's home at 6:30, it should be ready by 6:30. So that's a little tough, and he really wants me to be the one doing the cooking, and it's hard.
The new Mrs. Trump settled into her home in Trump Tower, but the marriage was off to a troubled start. Privately, his drive to fix his business setbacks caused tension between the newlyweds. In public, Marla had difficulty shaking the stigma of being the other woman, and rumors about Donald's womanizing plagued the couple. The stress on the marriage was too much. The couple parted ways in 1997. The split came just 1 month before their prenup expired. Luckily for Donald, his second divorce would cost a fraction of his first. A bachelor once again, Trump focused his energy on work. The 51-year-old real estate tycoon was preparing a comeback and was slowly pulling his company out of debt.
I was able to fight it clear. I never had to go bankrupt. I never had to do things that, unfortunately, friends of mine who were really talented people had to do. The banks were terrific as far as I was concerned. And they realized the importance of my talent and the importance of my name.
If you set Donald Trump down in the middle of the Mojave Desert, he would open a soft drink stand. He will never go down.
That year, Forbes magazine estimated his net worth at $450 million. But Trump balked at that number.
Malcolm Forbes once told me that Donald Trump was the only one who would call up and say, Malcolm, you've got it wrong. I'm not worth $1 billion. I'm worth $3 billion. And Malcolm would say, but Donald, we've got to subtract the debt from the, net worth. And Donald didn't see it that way.
Donald's a promoter. I think he even said in the book we wrote together that, a little exaggeration isn't a bad thing. He's a carnival barker. He's a P.T. Barnum. He's a larger-than-life figure. The truth is for university ethics professors. That's not Donald.
Of course, Trump made the best of his bad fortune. He wrote another book, this one called Trump, The Art of the Comeback. And as part of that comeback, he even considered running for president.
The polls have come out. They've been unbelievably strong. They say I'd win.
I looked at the possibility of running the Reform Party, which I didn't like too much, to put it mildly. It was a party in total chaos. And I decided I didn't want to do it. In many respects, I'm too honest to be a politician.
Next, Trump built luxury golf courses, bought the Miss Universe pageant, and added several more jewels to the Trump real estate crown. Trump International Hotel and Tower, Trump World Tower, Trump Park Avenue, Trump Place.
At this moment, I have 9 major towers under construction. And we're doing jobs in Miami, we're doing jobs in Korea, we're doing a lot of different developments. It's been very exciting.
Trump was back on top and looking for new empires to conquer. It wouldn't be long before he was at the reins of another huge success. By 2002, Donald Trump was back on top after a long fight to save his company from bankruptcy. That same year, Trump saw an opportunity to conquer a new frontier. Mark Burnett, the creator of the reality hit Survivor, approached the tycoon about a new show. Burnett wanted Trump to bring Survivor into the boardroom.
He said, Donald, I have an idea. I'm only going to use you. There's nobody else. I think it's going to be terrific. It's called The Apprentice.
Each week, a series of genuine business tasks are assigned to the 16 applicants. The person who fares worst comes to Donald Trump's boardroom, and one each week is fired.
You're fired. The old Cobra strike was all Donald. I don't think that there's any way around that one. That's a natural function of Donald Trump.
I've never used it in my life, but somehow it was on one episode, and people went crazy for that gesture.
The Apprentice was an immediate smash. Trump's tense boardroom showdown struck a chord.
I think everyone has sat across from their boss and been grilled and felt nervous about a project. People can come home from work and sit down and watch someone else get grilled.
Watching the boss in action seemed to have made Trump more appealing, even to those who got the axe.
Before the show started, I only knew of Donald Trump as bigger than life, arrogant, very successful businessman with really bad hair. And after the show, I still look at him as arrogant, confident, successful businessman with really bad hair. But he is so extremely likable and just a fantastic role model.
I just knew what I'd seen on television. His name's on all the buildings, kind of egocentric. And then, afterwards that really changed. I got to see him as a very human individual, someone who's by far one of the straightest shooters I knew.
We were flying from New York to Chicago. We were running late for a meeting, and on our way to the meeting, he insisted that we stop, and it was at a children's hospital, and there was a young boy who was dying of cancer, and it was through Make-A-Wish Foundation, and he wanted to meet Donald Trump, and there were no cameras there, there were no reporters there. He did it very, very quietly, and he really, made this kid's dream come true.
People got to know me much better. People thought of me as a vicious, horrible human being. And now they like me much better. And it's a pretty sad commentary when you think that what I do in The Apprentice is fire people on a constant basis, and they think you're such a nice guy compared to what you were. So it only tells you how bad my reputation used to be.
But not as bad as his hair.
I get killed on my hair. I just get killed. And it is mine. I wonder, is it so bad? I think maybe one of the reasons I don't change it is that I don't want to give in to this mass hysteria. But as it gets thinner and as it gets worse, who knows what happens.
Aside from his dubious hairstyle, Trump continued to have his share of ups and downs. In 2004, Trump Hotels and Casino Resorts filed for Chapter 11. Even so, in 2005, Forbes magazine estimated his net worth conservatively at $2.7 billion. Over the years, Donald Trump's children have grown to become celebrities in their own right, part of a new generation of American money.
I think Donald instilled good values in his children. I mean, his son, Donald Trump Jr., is now working for him.
You have a lot of closet space in this apartment.
It's not like a make-believe job where he just shows up and gets paid. He's actually making decisions and showing people around buildings, and he's very hands-on.
They're good kids. They're hardworking, and you know, they earn their money. That's for sure. I don't think these kids have any sense of entitlement, which to me is very, very impressive. You see how he treats his daughter Ivanka. You know, she's daddy's little girl, and you know, he loves to love her. You know, he loves to see her succeed, and he tries to support her. He's a good family man.
Ivanka Trump is someone to watch. You know, just out of Georgetown, she wants to go into real estate development. She is a beautiful, kind of unconventional beauty and smart.
I think she's going to help bring the Trump family name into a new position. I mean, we see her father's name on every building in New York, and yet it's met with some controversy. It's met with some level of disdain, but I think Ivanka's doing a lot to sort of change that.
But it's Donald's personal life that's gotten most of the press. In the years since he and Ivana split, Trump's love life has made as many headlines as his businesses. And for a time, Donald Trump was gaining a reputation as a ladies' man.
That whole divorce and the 3 months of it turned him into a guy who believes he's God's gift to women. He came to believe his own publicity from it, and he's never departed from it. And since he divorced Marla, he's very much, you know, my girls are taller, prettier, sexier than anybody else's.
Trump played the field until he found the tallest, prettiest, and sexiest of all, Slovenian model Melania Knauss.
We met at a party in New York in 1998. He came over and we started to chat, and it was a great chemistry between us.
From the day I met her, she's just a terrific person. She's not only beautiful on the outside, but she's even more beautiful on the inside, and she's just a great person.
He has a great sense of humor, and he's very warm heart, and very romantic. It's very private. We don't like to talk about that, but maybe people, they don't know, they don't think about him. It's always work, work, work. But he works because he's very passionate what he's doing.
For 5 years, the marriage-shy Donald and Melania dated. Then Trump proposed a permanent merger.
I've always felt that it's so important, the woman behind the man. And I've had the best 5 years of my life. These are the best 5 years. And I said to myself, hey, my woman was behind me for these 5 years. There must be something to that.
The Donald popped the question, and the couple began planning an opulent wedding at Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. Melania's dress graced the cover of Vogue magazine. Made from over 100 yards of white silk, the gown weighed 50 pounds and sparkled with 1,500 crystals. The embroidery alone took 550 hours to complete. Estimated to cost as much as $200,000, it was a gown befitting a billionaire's bride. After the January 22, 2005 wedding, the newlyweds skipped a honeymoon and went straight to work. A year later, the Trumps announced a new venture, parenthood. On March 20th, 2006, Barron Trump was born, making the 59-year-old a father for the 5th time.
If you were Donald Trump, wouldn't you bring as many kids into this world as you could? It's a great world when you're sitting up in the penthouse of Trump Towers. He's got a lot to offer kids, you know, that's for certain. He's such an active dad, and I mean, is he changing diapers? Probably not. That's probably not his thing. But you know, he's certainly a very loving dad, and you know, he's bringing Barron around to the, you know, different events and to the set, and I think it's his pride and joy.
Donald Trump's life rolled smoothly and successfully for the rest of that year. The Apprentice was coming back for season number 6, and his business was thriving. But the fighter in Donald Trump was soon reawakened. In December, Trump's Miss USA pageant was embroiled in scandal when reigning Queen Tara Conner was accused of underage drinking. Trump stood by Conner. He announced that she would check into rehab and keep her crown. Rosie O'Donnell on the television show The View lashed out at Trump, calling him a snake oil salesman and questioning his morality.
She knows Donald Trump, and for her not to expect Donald Trump to fight back is ridiculous. He hasn't gotten where he's at by letting people push him around. She should have known what she was getting herself into.
Donald fired insults back at Rosie, calling her disgusting and a slob. He also threatened to sue her for making false statements about his finances. After several weeks, the feud quieted down to an angry silence, neither side admitting defeat. But skirmishes like these barely ruffle a hair on the billionaire's head. Donald Trump has survived 2 failed marriages and narrowly escaped financial ruin. Today, he is just as brash and brilliant as he was when he first dreamed of taking Manhattan by storm.
People ask me all the time, how do you become successful? And I say, number one is you have to enjoy what you do. And if you don't enjoy it, you're never going to be successful unless you get really lucky. You have to enjoy what you do. Number 2 is you can't stop. You have to go through a wall. If there's a concrete wall ahead of you, you have to go through it, around it, over it, any way to get past that wall. You can't stop.
One thing about Donald Trump is he thinks big, and he's able to do large things. And I think, a lot of people in life, they set their goals far too low. I think you have to be exposed to it and see that, hey, I could do that.
Mr. Trump is the ultimate survivor. He's had his ups, he's had his downs, but he keeps climbing up to be on the top. And I don't think there's anybody else I can think of that epitomizes survivor more than him.
He's not purporting to be Mother Teresa. He is not purporting to be anything beyond what he is. He is what he is. He's a high-class, Wharton-educated, brilliant con man. And I think he's the best at it.
At least you know where he's coming from. I'd go into battle with Trump anytime.
In some sense, underneath all that swagger, he's a kid in a candy store. And the candy store seems to have candy even after 40 years available to him.
I think Donald Trump has a balanced life. He's a father. He certainly has fun. And he's at the top of his game. I think overall, that's success.